Hi, it's Tree here, and I've been noticing that there's more and more national dialogue happening about really important topics on internet platforms such as Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And what I notice about these conversations is that we have so much passion about these issues that we're choosing to dialogue about that the conversation often devolves into name calling, shaming, blaming, and flat out just yelling at each other on the internet. And what I know about change is that being yelled at is not going to influence anyone to change in the direction that we would hope that they could change into. The reason I feel qualified to talk about change and how change works is that I have a master's degree in chaos theory and social change, and that I applied that degree to a profession that was centered around managing wide-scale changes in a federal agency. And those were both changes of behavior as well as perspectives and attitudes for groups of people ranging from 50 to 35,000 people. So I definitely feel qualified to talk about how change happens and how we can positively influence others. So today I'm going to share a little bit about change and a model that helps us understand resistance to change. And this is going to be the first of a handful of videos where I'll share little nuggets about change. So for starters, keep in mind that the only person we have the power to change is ourselves. We can be a role model for change in others. And if we're living the change that we want to be in the world and remembering to treat one another with respect instead of yelling and name calling, there's a greater chance that we're going to influence others to move in the direction that we hope they'll move in. So let's talk about resistance to change. Resistance to change is when people don't want to change. They dig in their heels and they say, no, I'm not doing that. And it doesn't matter what the change is, whether we're talking about social issues, political issues, environmental issues, issues of health and lifestyle. You want someone to change their diet. You want someone to vote a certain way or pass a certain piece of legislation. You want people to recognize certain groups are underprivileged and to change their behavior so that things shift in the society. Whatever your thing is, people are going to be resistant. And this is a diagram called not a diagram, it's a list. The levels of resistance to change. So level 1 is, I just need more information. I don't understand why I should change. So this is where posts and conversations and articles and things that promote just simply the data. Here's the data on the historical facts, for instance, of white privilege and lack of rights to vote and own property for people of color, for instance. Sometimes we just need to provide some historical data. The second level of resistance is I'm having a strong emotional reaction to this, and I just need to process what this is. Okay, so I'm going to use the example of white fragility and white privilege. So maybe you give me more information about the disadvantage and privilege between whites and blacks in the United States. And when I start to openly look at the information that you've given me, I might feel anger, shame, blame. I might feel threatened. Some part of me deep inside might feel like I'm going to lose resources. Whatever emotions come up are going to get in the way of me really hearing you. So when we're dealing with level 2 resistance to some type of change, the only way to work through that is to give people the space and grace to feel those emotions. Now, one of the problems is people don't want to feel negative emotions. So in order to be a positive influence when we're dealing with level 2 resistance, we have to create trust and safe spaces for people to feel vulnerable. So in the example of race and equality and white fragility, it wouldn't be appropriate to expect people of color to do the emotional labor to hold the space for white people to process their fear of admitting that there is some kind of privilege, or anger at the idea that there is some kind of privilege, or whatever those feelings are. So white people have to do the work of creating an opportunity for other white people to see themselves. It's not easy to see ugly things about ourselves. And adult learning is often filled with doubt and fear and guilt and shame and blame. Because as adults, when we discover that there's something we don't know, we can feel all of these horrible feelings, embarrassment. And so we shut all that down and we choose to try not to learn. It takes a hell of a lot of courage for adults to learn things about themselves in the world. So if you really want to have a positive influence on people, you have to find ways to help them stand in their negative emotions. And my experience is that I have to be willing to stand in my shame and guilt and embarrassment, be vulnerable, and create safety and trust so that other people might feel like it's okay to be vulnerable. And we can have a whole nother conversation about ways to do that. It's not easy work. So it's not necessarily something that you can do on a chat thread in Facebook or Twitter. And now the third level of resistance to change, I hope you can see this, I don't know if you can, is that I am so opposed to this change that I'm going to sabotage it. I'm going to do whatever I can to sabotage it. This is where we start to see people who will subvert and thwart legislation, people who band together to put themselves into office, to shift the number of chairs that their political party holds on the Supreme Court. All change has multiple sides. There's always going to be people who believe things should go one way and people who believe things should go the other way. So what feels like sabotage to one group is another group deciding that they really have to fight for what they believe in. So it's important to keep that in mind. I don't think that there's anybody who's truly evil. Maybe one or two people are, I don't know. But in order for this to work, in order for us to feel like we have a chance to create change in the world, we have to start to understand the mechanics of change. We have to think about adult learning and how adults learn. We have to think about the ways in which we're attempting to influence one another. And we have to give people the space and the grace to see themselves as part of the problem, which is not fun. And then we have to be there to help them move into being part of the solution and not just yelling. Okay? All right. I hope you find this helpful, and I plan to talk more about change in the coming weeks. So I'll see you soon.